There's a big difference between stupidity and uh, deliberate immorality. And the Vatican, I suspect, has long experience of both. It's long been accustomed to operating within its own legal sphere, a world governed by canon law, papal decrees, an ingrained culture of secrecy. Uh, but recent events in the last year or so have forced the Holy See to step beyond its walled city-state and into the harsh light of British commercial courts. The result? An extraordinary scandal involving embezzlement, extortion, the kind of financial mismanagement that makes even the worst of Westminster's blunders look like amateur hour. At the heart of this crisis is the Vatican's disastrous investment in a London property at 60 Sloane Avenue, a deal so ill-conceived that it cost the church an eye-watering €140 million, and initially handled by a financier called Raffaele Mincione, the transaction quickly descended into an unholy mess, with Vatican prosecutors accusing Mincione and others of exploiting the church for financial gain. Now, the British courts have cast a different light on the affair, rejecting claims that Mincione was guilty of outright fraud, while acknowledging that the Vatican had every reason to feel utterly let down. In other words, the Holy See may not have been conned, but it was certainly incompetent. And I imagine, quite frankly, that the occasional cardinal is not necessarily a financial bigwig. That's not how he got his job. And this legal tug-of-war has highlighted stark differences between Vatican justice and the British legal system. In Vatican City, laws are often opaque, trials are held behind closed doors, and due process can be an elastic concept. It's a place where senior clerics wield enormous power, where the mere accusation of wrongdoing can be enough to condemn, and where scapegoating outsiders is a time-honoured tradition. And the British legal system, by contrast, demands forensic evidence, considers both sides very carefully, and places a high premium on procedural fairness. And this became clear when Mincione, already convicted by the Vatican's own tribunal, sought a ruling from the British High Court to clear his name, or the English High Court. So while the British judges declined to exonerate him fully, they did confirm that he had not acted dishonestly or committed fraud. And this verdict undercut the Vatican's narrative and raised uncomfortable questions about the Church's rush to prosecute those that it considered expendable. One of the most damning aspects of this saga is not just the financial loss, but the source of the funds that were squandered. Because much of the money came from Peter's Pence. This is a charitable fund where churches take a collection, at least in my experience, once a year. Churches all the way around the country, all the way around the world, take a collection. And this is intended to aid the poor and support church missions. Instead, this money was funneled into a speculative property venture where it was consumed by fees, commissions, and a string of disastrous decisions. This raises a fundamental question. Who in the Vatican was asleep at the wheel? Who thought that Peter's Pence could be used to play the markets? The key figure in this debate is a person called Cardinal Angelo Becciu, a once powerful Vatican official who was ultimately convicted of embezzlement. There's also Gianluigi Torzi, another broker who allegedly extorted the Holy See of €15 million. But the rot extends far beyond those two individuals. The scandal has exposed a culture of financial mismanagement within the Secretariat of State, a department so notorious for its lack of oversight and its penchant for secrecy that it makes that it makes even Agatha Christie look a bit loose. The Vatican's own prosecutors have acknowledged that internal complicity played a role in allowing bad actors to exploit the system. Yet the Holy See has been eager to place the blame squarely on the external financiers. From the outset, there was an attempt to frame Mincione and Torzi as the primary villains, a convenient narrative that allowed the Vatican to deflect attention from its own considerable failings. But this strategy has backfired spectacularly. The British court's ruling has now cast doubt on the Vatican's version of events, leaving open the possibility that incompetence rather than criminal conspiracy was the main driver of this fiasco. It still gets people off the hook. But it leaves people wondering, why are these Vatican clerics playing such ridiculous roles? And the Vatican's decision to air its dirty laundry in an English courtroom has exposed the Church to levels of scrutiny it's ill-equipped to handle. In Vatican trials, the Pope ultimately holds the ultimate authority. In British courts, justice is meted out without fear or favour. The Holy See has found itself forced to argue its case before independent judges, and the outcome has been deeply embarrassing. Rather than confirming the Vatican's claims, the court ruling has reinforced the perception that the Holy See was not so much defrauded as disastrously naive. And this scandal is not just a tale of financial misadventure, it's also a test of Pope Francis's much vaunted reforms. The pontiff has tried to clean up Vatican finances, cracking down on corruption, improving transparency, but this case reveals how deeply entrenched the problem remains. And the Church's financial apparatus is riddled with outdated structures, a lack of accountability, and a resistance to external oversight. If the Vatican truly wants to prevent future scandals, it needs to take a hard look at its own systems. It must accept that its legal system is ill-suited to handling complex financial crimes, that it cannot operate with the secrecy of a medieval court, and that blaming outsiders will not absolve it of its own negligence. Above all, it must remember that the faithful do not donate Peter's pence so that cardinals can dabble in London real estate. And the debacle has left the Vatican facing a profound reckoning. It's lost millions, damaged its credibility, and exposed its internal dysfunction to the world. And while British law has upheld the Vatican's right to feel wronged, it has also highlighted its culpability. The Church may have sought to punish financial wrongdoing, but in doing so, it's laid bare its own ridiculous failings. The question now is whether the Vatican can learn from this episode or whether it simply intends to retreat behind the Vatican walls, hoping that the world moves on. The Vatican moves very slowly. One thing is certain, the next time the Holy See decides to dabble in high finance, it might want to consult some better accountants and perhaps a few British lawyers before it does so.